Hi, thank you for joining me today. I am Sharmen Kimbrough, one of the relationship coaches here at the Marriage Recovery Center. I want to talk just a bit today about psychology and faith and whether or not they are at odds. One of the discussions that I have been a part of for years, because I started studying psychology decades ago, believe it or not, one of the issues was that the debate about how theological, so to speak, psychology could be. And in reality, I have come to the conclusion that psychology is actually really a very secular world trying to make sense of a spiritual issue. God created us as spiritual beings and as psychological beings, and that so many of the issues of our mind that they're trying to make sense of from a psychological standpoint is simply a secular world trying to make sense of it. And yes, there is quite a bit of nonsense out there and quite a bit that is at odds and in conflict with Christian ideals and how we make sense of the world as Christians from a spiritual standpoint. But in reality, we are very complicated beings, and there is so much about psychology, studying the mind and how we think, and even mental disorders, mental issues, that is not in conflict, because again, it is a secular world trying to make sense of the brokenness of our spirituality. Sometimes something I see is that there is a distress, especially in biblical counseling circles, and people who have come through very conservative Christian homes or Christian churches, that there's this distrust or this fear that psychology is actually going to dilute or go against their theology. So that in essence, at the end of the day, it's their moral fabric that is feeling threatened because of psychology, because of the labels, because it's not put in spiritual terms. And what I would say to that is that underneath all that really just shows a need to have a greater understanding, first of all, of a sense of self. Because when you really know who you are, you're not threatened by other information. When you know what you believe, you know what you're standing on, other information isn't a threat. It's just something that helps bring a broader understanding. And a broader understanding doesn't mean it dilutes anything. It just brings a broader understanding. And so having that fear there, I think, is normal. I think it also comes from not necessarily knowing exactly what you stand on. And because that moral foundation feels insecure, or you don't have the right words for it, or you're not sure, or you're relying on an institution to speak it to you, to tell it to you, and that if you deviate from that, there's something drastic that's going to happen to you, traumatic that's going to happen to you, that creates that fear there. But again, where I see there not being a conflict is that at the end of the day, we have got to understand our thinking in order to rightly see God. We've got to understand our brokenness in order to rightly understand what redemption looks like. And psychology can do a lot to help us come to that understanding. Again, there is a lot of fluff and nonsense that we have to weed out, but that doesn't mean we have to be afraid of all of it. And honestly, if you think about it, one of Satan's greatest tools is to take a little bit of truth and make it full of distractions and chaos so that we miss the point, but there's still truth in there to be found. And God's truth, all truth, is God's truth. So our job as people, not just me as a coach, but our job as people is to always be looking for the truth, seeking the truth, learning to walk in it. That is the call of our life to do. Proverbs says that wisdom is supreme, though it costs everything we have to get understanding. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about here, is looking at all things, looking for truth, because all truth is God's truth, regardless of the source, right? So that is something to think about. There's not just the realm of psychology as completely separate from theology or Christianity. It's a way of understanding how we think that can totally emphasize and contribute to understanding how God created us so that we can better understand Him and understand our purpose. If theology, a distorted view of theology, is used in a coaching process to lead towards oppression or coercion or accusation or condemnation, that's where I would say it is opposed to Christianity. Again, God's truth, all truth is God's truth, and God's truth always leads to light, to life, to freedom, to joy, because this is a reflection of God. This is what He has created us to do. So if theology is used, Christian theology is used in the context of a counseling or a coaching relationship, and it's used in such a way that it's about coercion, oppression, and condemnation, that in itself is going to be as equally damaging as psychological nonsense that is in conflict with Christianity. So I would not make the distinction between psychology and Christianity. I would make a distinction between truth that leads to life versus deception that leads to death. And in either of those realms, there's the propensity for both, because we have a very real enemy that wants to make sure that we are distracted, that we are complacent, and that we don't see the truth. So, learning to unpack that and get back down to who is God, who are we, what is our role here, and the whole purpose of it is, underneath everything else going on, to find Him and learn to love Him and reflect Him more and more to the world. So biblical counseling, even if it's put out in a context that again is leading towards coercion, death, oppression, something that doesn't reflect God, that's as damaging as bad psychology. So the idea is, the plan is, the purpose is to get back to truth, because all truth is God's truth. And it is the truth that brings healing. It's God that brings healing, brings life, light, freedom, joy, abundance, even in the middle of this broken world that at the end of the day we really can't make sense of, other than that it is broken by sin and that we've just got to keep our eyes on God and keep walking through it, doing what He puts in front of us to do, which always looks like reflecting Him to the world. So, faith and psychology, I would say they are not at all odds, not in reality. I think there's all kinds of crazy thinking out there on both sides of the fence. Our job is to find the truth so that you can see God and walk with Him. So thanks for joining me today. If you have questions, concerns, or I sparked a lot of curiosity, I would love to unpack this with you more. Any of us at the Marriage Recovery Center would love to chat with you about it, so contact us at frontdesk@marriagerecoverycenter.com or give us a call at the number below. Thank you. Have a great day.